All right, so let's move ahead with our next talk. And before we go ahead, some little requests. One is to keep your phones on silent because that would end up disturbing the speaker. Apart from that, if we end the discussion, if the discussion ends, and if there are some questions that you'd like to ask, the speaker would be available in the speaker's lounge next door. So you can reach out to him over there and continue with asking your questions if the time ends over here. All right, so up next, we have the very famous Dr. Nestori Cinema. And he is, so we all know him, he's a very famous person. And he's a senior principal information security researcher at SecureWorks CTU. Previously, Dr. Cinema worked as a CIO, consultant, trainer, and a university lecturer for over 20 years. And yes, he speaks in regular conferences. He's been the Microsoft's most valuable security researcher. He also holds multiple Microsoft certifications. And he has spoken in a lot of conferences with respect to Microsoft 365 and Azure AD security. So please welcome Dr. Nestori Cinema.
Thank you for kind words. Let's try to make them work. Okay. So, does it work? Of course it doesn't. That's nice. Now we go. Okay. So, well, you already introduced me, so thanks about that. So, again, my name is Dr. Nestori Cinema, and I come from Finland, but everything else you said is true, so we can move forward. By the way, follow me in Twitter or X or whatever it's called nowadays. And Mastodon and Blue Sky, so I'm everywhere. With the same title, Dr. Azure AD. And most of you, I think, know me best of my tool, AADInternals. Who has used that? Okay. If you haven't, you should, because APT29 uses that too, also known as Nobilium. Well, at least they have used same techniques according to my attack framework. Okay, what else? Yes, so I was in summer holiday with my wife in Spain, and in July 11th, Microsoft decided to change the name of the product, so it's not anymore Azure AD, now it's Azure AD. And that's very great for a guy whose handle is Dr. Azure AD, and the tool name is AADInternals. But that's not the worst part, because I actually ordered a new car before we went to the holidays, and it was then delivered after that. And I chose vanity place to that. And of course, that's AAD. So every time Microsoft is doing rebranding, it costs me 1,000 euros. So it's pretty much the same in dollars. Okay, so I have some slides and demos. And I actually asked that, do you want to have recorded or live demos? And most of you wanted to have recorded, so recorded it's going to be. Well, I have one live demo at the end, but otherwise all the demos are like recorded. And let's start with some background information. So how many of you knows what is Azure AD or Azure AD? Okay, but short introduction, just sort of background information. So it's Microsoft cloud-based identity and access management. Closer? Oh, okay. Better? Okay. So let's try to get this to work. Okay, and it's used by, of course, Microsoft's own products like 365 and thousands of third-party applications, so there's a lot of them. And it has multiple authentication options, and that's important for attackers. We will get back to that later. And usually all the stuff that is in there is synchronized from on-prem environment or on-prem AD. So that's how it's usually done. And that is done using a product called Azure AD Connect or Cloud Sync. So there are two different things to do that. Yes, so about, well, the information I'm going to share with you today, I used that actually last year to gather some data about how many of people are using Azure AD actually. And I think Nick's Geek had a presentation earlier, well, it was yesterday, and so he had some background information, but I have also. So let's start with Fortune 500 organizations. So about 18 months ago, 88% was using Azure AD, which is a quite big number. But in Finland, where I come from, the percentage is 98. So it's a lot more. And then top universities globally, roughly 95% is using. And this next one is funny. So in Finland, we have like 302 municipalities, like cities and towns, and there's one who doesn't use. So it's almost 100%, but if you round up, it's 100%. So it's fair to say that everybody in Finland is using, and globally also like 90%. So that is very interesting to attackers. So there's a lot of organizations who are using, but you still need to know what to attack. So not just that they are using, but are there something that you can actually attack? So, well, this is, everybody knows this. So at least some kind of version about cyber kill chain. So we are in the Recon Village, so we are in the first wave. So we want to gather information so that we can start the weaponization, then the actual attack. But we are not doing anything bad at this point. Well, nothing bad. So we are not attacking, but of course we are gathering intelligent information, so that is kind of also bad. But luckily there's a lot of stuff available like for free, and even without any authentication. Okay, so I told you that there are multiple authentication options, and usually you have connected your on-prem to cloud, and here are 4, at least currently, available like authentication options. So I'm not going to deep dive into the details, but still I'm going to introduce each of those. So the first one on the left is called Identity Federation, or ADFS is the product or Windows feature you use to implement that. So have any of you heard about golden channel attacks? Yes, so this is the one. You can do that. Okay, and this was the first available option that allowed you to use the same credentials in on-prem and cloud. Okay, but it's very like a big environment, so you need to have at least 4 servers to run that, and that's not very good option for small businesses, for instance. So then Microsoft introduced the password hash synchronization. So basically, we have a component, this Azure AD Connect, that is synchronizing both users and object and other objects, but also password hashes. Not the NT hashes. Well, technically yes, but they are rehashed 1,000 times, so that's okay. And then there's a new stuff introduced a couple of years ago called password authentication, which means that you install a small agent on your on-prem environment, and then when people are trying to authenticate, those credentials are sent to that agent, and then it tries to log in using your Windows domain, and if that's okay, user gets in. And the last one is certificate-based authentication. And also, there's a funny thing called seamless single sign-on, which is Kerberos-based single sign-on, with all the deficiencies that the Kerberos has. So basically, if you are able to steal a certain NT hash from your on-prem AD, you can log in as any user you want to cloud if they are using that. So there's like 5 different ways, at least, how you can attack the authentication stuff. And why this is important? Well, I have a couple of slides here. So first one is for ADFS. So there are actually 8 different ways, at least, how you can obtain the token signing certificate and perform golden attacks. So this is very complicated, and you can just get one of those paths and you are good to go. So if you want to protect against those, that's not that easy, and it's good for attackers, right? And the second one is for PTA, and the PTA is a very interesting product, because if you are able to compromise the server that is running that PTA agent, you can export the certificate, and after that you have a persistent, undetectable way to perform denial of service attacks, and also use that as a backdoor. And that's quite neat. So if they are using that, it would be nice to know. Well, unfortunately, at least now we can't know if they are using PTA. Other methods, yes, but not the PTA. But this is just to show you that these things are very complicated, and when they are complicated, they are always vulnerable somehow. Okay, then about hybrid cloud security, a couple of words. So people have asked me like years that is it cloud safe? And I would say that yes, it is. At least until recently when they stole that token signing certificate, but usually it's okay. So if you want to, as a user, access the cloud, you need to have like some proof of identity, and that's it. So it's easy to use. But it's not good for bad guys because they don't have the proof of identity. So they have two options. So they can either get the proof of identity, like using phishing, and then they are able to log in, or they can spoof the identity. And how can they do that? Well, if you have connected your on-prem environment to cloud, you're actually drilling holes to that safe cloud. And now the attackers can attack using the old methods they already know to those on-prem components, and via them they can go and attack your cloud. So this is what happened with SolarGate actually. Okay, and then some goals to our Recon. So what we want to do, we want to enumerate authentication options so that we know where to attack. We want to have find valid accounts and domains so that we might do some social engineering, for instance. And of course, we could do like phishing much easier if we know the valid accounts. And we don't want to leave any traces, meaning that the target organization, we don't want target organization to detect us, obviously. That would be otherwise quite stupid Recon. Okay, so then how to get OSINT, or open source intelligence. So we have two options. So we have anonymous API calls, and this is for everybody. So everyone can use these APIs to get that information. And then another way is to use authenticated APIs calls. And that requires that you need to have an Azure AD tenant. It doesn't have to be the target tenant. You can just sign up for a trial, and that's it. You just need to have one, which means that you need to log into that your own tenant so that you can get information from other tenants. So this is how Azure AD is done or built. Okay, so what can you get using these anonymous API calls? So first of all, you will get all registered domains that that target tenant has. You may find out that is that domain managed or federated, and if it's federated, it's open for golden channel attacks. That's always good to know. And by the way, you only need one domain being federated so that you can do those attacks. And of course, you can have DNS information. So are there any mail exchange records or SPF records and so on? So you know that is that organization routing mail through Microsoft 365. You can have tenant ID with domain name. You can find out does the user exist. So if you have a username, you can try that, is that real username? And then you can see that is the tenant using or is the tenant ever used a thing called Azure AD Connect Cloud Sync, which is a new kind of tool instead of Azure AD Connect. So this Cloud Sync is new version that Microsoft would like us to use, but usually we don't. And then we also can find out that is the tenant using Microsoft Defender for Identity. So we will get more likely get caught if they are using. So it's good to know beforehand. Okay, so domain names. So how can we get those? So technically, this is using Exchange Online Auto Discover service, which is used usually for that if your user have your Outlook client and they type in their username, then the Outlook can go to the Auto Discover service to get information that where that Outlook should connect. However, if you want to, you can make a federation between two Exchange organizations. And federation means that if you are organization A and organization B, you can allow them to see others' calendars, for instance. So that's the federation. And for that purpose, the auto discovery is also used that you can ask that, okay, here's a domain name, what other domains there are. And I actually talked today with one of the Microsoft guys, is he here, might be. So he asked me that, is it really true that you can get this information from Azure AD because the documentation said that you need to be at least a guest to get that information? And I said, no, that's not true. So basically, there's an API endpoint. You send there a SOAP request that has a domain, and as a return, you will get a list of all the other domains that tenant has. And this is very good for Recon because there might be some new product name, for instance, or there might be some mergers coming up, so they have just registered domains there and so on. So yeah, and also we can see that the Exchange version is 2015, which is quite old. I don't know, is it really that old, but at least it says so. So that was the first one. And then there's a different APIs you can call to get information about the domains itself. So what's the domain type? Is it managed or federated? Or does the user exist? So there's a different endpoints to do that. And then you can also see that is this technical name, desktop SSO, the sailing name is seamless single sign-on, is that enabled? So that was the Kerberos stuff. So if you can get that entity hash of certain service account, you can then log in as any user to the cloud if they are using this. And then you can also see that is the certificate-based authentication enabled. So a lot of information, and these are all like open APIs. And then, I don't know, did you see the Nick's Geek talk yesterday? But he actually found a nice way to enumerate users using OneDrives. So usually, if you have a user who has a license for Teams, for instance, that user also will have OneDrive. And basically, what you do is that if your organization is like, let's say, Microsoft, and the username is like user@microsoft.com, you need to normalize that, which means that you just replace @ and dots with an underscore, and then you make HTTP head request to that URL. And if that returns 200 or something like that, the user exists. And if it's 400, it doesn't exist. So quite neat way. And this is good because there's no login events anywhere. So target organization can't detect this. Only Microsoft can, but not the target organization. And these are also not throttled. These other APIs are. So after 100,000 something, you will get false positives that it exists even though it doesn't. Okay, tenant ID, just call that API, that URL with the domain name, and you will get back in a JSON file where the tenant ID exists. So you can parse it, for instance, from here. So quite easy, neat way to do that. And then the Azure AD Connect Cloud Sync. So how do we know is the organization using that? Well, they decided to make the username standard. I mean, the service account name is standard. It's always the same. AD to AD sync service account @ domain name. And if that user exists, you know that they are using that. So quite easy way again to find out internal information of the organization. And the last one is the defender for identity. So if these DNS names exist, then you know that they are using that. So again, quite easy way. So just ping that if it answers, or just do other like NS lookup, and if you can find that, you know that they are using Microsoft Defender for identity. Okay, and here are all the commands you can use with my AADInternals toolkit. So I'm going to show demos for this. So 4 commands, and each are doing one bit, and then the last one is going to do all the stuff. So let's start with the first one. So we want to get login information for a certain domain. We just give a domain name, and it is calling 3 or 4 different APIs, and then just put them all together so we can see that we can see that account type is federated, for instance. So Microsoft.com is federated. And then let's move forward to the next one. So we're going to get the tenant ID. Well, this is quite simple. You just give a domain name and it will return you the tenant ID. And tenant ID you will need to use in certain API calls if you are doing some hacking, if you get inside the organization. So it's a very valuable information. And the next one, we're going to list all the domains of the organization. And this is actually quite fast, so it's a second or something, and it will list all the domains. For instance, Microsoft has about 280 or something domains, like June.net. Does anybody remember that? Yeah. Okay, and the last one is the actual kill chain functionality I've included in my tool. So it provides some domain name and it will do all the stuff. So it will gather all the information it can, especially from the domains. So the last part is FT means format table, but this takes a lot. So I, cut it away something, and here we can see a lot of new information. And let's just scroll back up. Yes, so here we have like what is tenant brand, tenant name, tenant ID, tenant region, that's worldwide. Yes, and it doesn't use desktop SSO and the cloud sync they are using. So that's a good information. And then if you want to do some phishing stuff, it's good to know that is it using this particular like domain for mail exchange? Is it sending it from the cloud? So if there's SPF record, it means that it is sending outside also. And DMARC is, it also says that it is using that for sending email. But all that kind of information you can get. And also the STS means that what is the federation server name that particular domain is using. Okay, and then we have the authenticated API calls, which means that you need to have your own tenant where you can log in and then gather stuff of other tenants. And what you can get is you can get the tenant name or domain from tenant ID. And where do you use this? Well, actually, this is more like for admins. So if you have you can see that some people are logging in using some weird application. You can't see who created that, but you can see the tenant ID who created that application. So you can do like a reverse lookup for that. And then if you have the user's email, you will get the user's object ID in Azure AD using that email. You can have a user's display name and also user's UPN or user principal name. But this is also neat. You can see team status of that user if the user is using Teams. And here are the commands again, which I have in AADInternals. So you can get the domain, you can get find the Teams user, and then you can see if that user is available. So let's start. So first we need to get an access token because we need to be authenticated, and this is for our own tenant. So I'm just going to get one for Microsoft Graph, which you can use to get that tenant domain using tenant ID. So you need to have that. And you need to be actually global admin in your own tenant. I don't know why, but you need to be global admin, but because it's your own tenant, you can be. And now you can ask information about other tenants. The next one is, what was it? Access token for Teams, yes. Because Teams has quite interesting APIs, and one of them is that you can search external user, and when you give the user principal name of the target user, it will get a lot of nice information. Well, for obvious reasons, I'm not showing those to you, but it shows what is the user's tenant ID, what is the user's user principal name, what is the display name, and then what is the object ID. Now, I don't know why that information is revealed, but it is there. And one thing that you can do with the object ID is that you can see that is that user online in Teams. So let's see how that goes. So you can provide either user principal name or the object ID, and then it will tell you is this user online or not. And actually in the Nick's Geeks talk, he had a nice graph that he used this API to get information that were Microsoft employees working or not. And they had a all hands meeting in Friday in certain time because they were all like offline. And now we can see that this particular person is offline. And this is I don't know why this information is available. Well, because, information must be free and so on. Okay, but yes, so basically that was all I got for those AADInternals commands. But for those who don't want to type PowerShell, I made a tool, online tool. It's from aadinternals.com/OSINT. and it can tell you same thing that I showed to you. And I'm going to demonstrate that, by the way, next. So here we are, and we go to AADInternals.com/OSINT. And let's zoom a bit. So here you can give a tenant ID, you can give domain name or email address for user. Let's try this. So we can see that it's the CIO of Microsoft doing something. Okay, so we can see what's the logo of that organization. We have tenant branding, tenant ID worldwide. They are not using single sign-on, but they are using the Azure AD Cloud Connect sync. No certificate-based authentication, at least for this user, and they have that much verified domains. I might mistype this actually. I always do that. Let's try again. So yes, now we can see that he's away. So there's no calling to him. And actually, if you think about this team status, that's a very good recon information, because you can actually follow somebody. What is he doing? So is he available? Is he not? And then you can well, you know what you can do with that information when you know where people are. And also we have links to, so we can click here. Let's see how this works. So it wants me to sign in, and let's see, does this work? No, it didn't. So, but usually there's ADFS servers, they are asking that where do you want to log in, so you can actually see other organizations. This organization has business relationships, and that's also more information for you to start searching for more or gathering more intelligence. Okay, but yes, that was all. Thank you.